I'm here with Dr. Frank Gibbons, an Army veteran who served during the Iraq and Afghanistan war. So first question, where and when were you born?
I was born in Cranston, Rhode Island in 1976.
What did your parents do for a living?
My mom, she worked for the government, and my dad was a carpenter.
How many siblings did you have?
I grew up by myself, but I now have 3 stepsisters.
Did anyone in your family serve in the military? If yes, who?
My grandfather and his 2 brothers served in the military, as well as my stepfather.
Was that a motivation to join the military for you?
A little bit, yeah.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Before I was entered the service, I was in dental school, and that's where I had my first commission as a second lieutenant.
In what branch of the military did you serve?
In the Army.
How old were you, and did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted, and it was in 2002.
Why did you choose that specific branch of the military?
Part of it was because in high school I was in JROTC, and I did a little bit of ROTC when I went to college, so I was very familiar with the Army at that point.
Do you recall your first days of service, and what did they feel like?
My first days of service. Well, my first days of service were technically in dental school, which was very different, but when I got out of the military, my first days of service were actually in Germany, and that was quite different than living in the U.S. in a small town.
What happened when you departed for training camp and during your early days of training?
After I graduated dental school, we did our training down in Texas at Fort Sam Houston, and we had 6 to 10 weeks of very intense officer training.
So do you recall your instructions and how was the training, and how did you get through it?
A lot of it I remember as death by PowerPoint, which was interesting. And outside of the classroom, there was a lot of intense training. Being from the Northeast, we had a much milder climate, so we were down there during the summertime in Texas, and it was pretty much 100 every day. So a lot of that was, chemical warfare training with rubber suits on, and it was very hot and intense.
Did you receive any specialized training? If so, what? And tell me a little bit about it.
We received weapons training, M16, M9, assault rifles. We had a lot of just in general training that as a dentist we wouldn't use, but depending on what type of unit you served in, you may have a use for. Some of the chemical warfare training we received was pretty intense. Using a mask in a gas chamber, that type of stuff.
How did you adapt to the military life, including the physical part of it, the food, and social life?
The social life is something that is very great. It's, I think, one of the hardest parts when people come out of the military. They miss that camaraderie. The food is pretty standard, I guess. You just get used to it. What was the first part of the question?
The physical.
Oh, yeah, I had always gone to the gym, so for me that wasn't that big of a deal. It was a lot more running than I was used to, so I adapted a little bit to that.
Was there something special you did for good luck?
For good luck. I didn't per se have a good luck ritual, but I think one of the things that's important is to stay in contact with your family and friends that are not where you are employed. Because as living in the military, you always get moved around, whether it's on a 6 months basis, a year, every few years, every 3 years. It just depends.
Associated with that question is your faith, like how much your faith impacted your service, if any.
Yeah, I was brought up Catholic. I think, that in combination with my military life always sort of leads you in a good direction to sort of do what's right and help people.
Where did you serve, and what was your job/assignment?
My first military assignment was in Germany, and that's where I stayed overseas most of the time, besides my deployment to Iraq for Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. It was a consecutive tour, total of 15 months.
Do you remember arriving, and what was it like?
Arriving was interesting. The plane went down at a very steep angle. And yeah, you get down very quick, and I guess that's so you're not hanging in the air for them to shoot you down longer. And then you kind of go from place to place to place to place to place until you get to your final destination. So you stay a lot of time in sort of camps and tents and stuff like that. You receive some additional training right when you get in country. You do some more weapons training. They do some specialized training, desert warfare training. So it was very sort of rushed. And once you get to where you're going, things just kind of settle down.
Tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
Well, some of them, like I said, I served in 3 different areas. So the first place we're at was actually a prison camp. So being a dentist, we still had to treat the prisoners. And it was very tough for me at the beginning because you want to serve in the military, and the first thing you end up doing is treating prisoners. And they come in and they're color-coded, yellow, green, red, depending on their severity of capture, associated, directly related. So some of the people that were in the red jumpsuits, were directly related to either killing or wounding American soldiers. So it was very challenging emotionally for me in that respect. So that was very memorable at the prison camp. And then I was on the Iranian border. That was Camp Buka, the prison camp. On the Iranian border, I was at Fob Delta. And there was a little different. I was much more laid back. Even though we were on the Iranian border, you could kind of go up to the top of the medical clinic at night and sort of like watch the firefights. It was across the river, so there wasn't any direct threat. And I had to actually there was no dental clinic at that point when I got there, so we had a lawn chair and a compressor, and we just sort of made do with that. And then, so my job there was actually to build the dental clinic, so that was pretty interesting considering I was fresh out of dental school and really had no knowledge of how to do that. And everything when you're downrange is sort of like the barter system. So I can remember this one major that was in charge of building things. He really liked chess, and so he wanted to play chess all the time. And if I wanted something done, I had to play chess with him to sort of get certain things done. So there was always this give and take to sort of move things along, cut through some of the red tape. We did have one rocket attack when we were there, which we all kind of get herded to a shelter. And the sirens go off, and you didn't see a lot of that at that place. And the last place I was at was the Green Zone of the Victory Base complex, where all the Saddam's palaces were. And that was a little more built up. They had a lot more amenities for people. You had a lot more mortar attacks. So almost on a daily basis, they would sort of launch mortars for somewhere, trying to specific locations. It was memorable because you could, as you were laying there at night, you could sort of hear them come in, boom, and then we get louder and louder and louder, trying to sort of find their target, because they didn't have the sophistication that we had, so they would have to sort of go by line of sight.
Did you think the war would last as long as it did?
By the time I got there, I had thought that things were winding down, which they did shortly after I left. I was not expecting us to go back there, which we did, so I kind of, some of the people that were there at the very early phases probably had a much different different opinion of things, because they really didn't have anything, where when I was there, things were sort of mostly built up. So we had a dining facility and showers. Some of the people that were there right at the beginning probably didn't have most of that stuff, or not to the large. And we still have like an area you can go and buy things.
What was your motivation for participating in the war?
Well, pretty much when you decide to serve, especially in a time of war, it's not really, you go in knowing that you're going to get deployed somewhere. You don't know where that's going to be, whether it's going to be Iraq, Afghanistan, some other place we're not in yet. So for me, I felt the need to sort of serve my country, and I was glad that I had a chance to do that.
Did you find there was a turning point in the war?
I don't think it was ever a question of whether we were going to win the war. It was sort of more of, were we going to get out of it what we wanted to get out of it. And that, I don't know, that's a tough question to answer, because there was a lot of different reasons that you would say that we went into the war, and whether or not it was a success. I guess in the end we got Saddam Hussein, which is good, but there's a lot of gray areas in terms of the exact reasons why we're there in the first place.
Do you think Obama or Bush did a better job commanding the army during the war?
It's a tough question for the simple reason of that when you're there, you don't see the decisions. You see in a very small scale the decisions that are made on a large scale. So, you don't see the broad strokes, you see sort of the minute details. So it's hard to say who really did a better job, at least in my opinion. It's a tough question.
If you could go back in time and choose to enlist in the army, would you do it?
I would still do it. I think I think there were good memories that I'll always have, regardless of all the bad that was in there. It was good experiences, and some of the friends that you make, friends for life. So I think most people that were in the military would probably, they have fond memories of it. In some capacity, would want to go back.
Were you in combat, and what did you see while you were in combat?
I was not directly in combat. Like I said, the most combat that I saw were sort of the mortars and the rocket attacks. I saw a lot of after effects of combats, sort of people that would come back shot or limbs missing in that respect. So I saw more from a medical standpoint than I did from an actual direct combat standpoint.
Did your unit have any casualties? As you said, you saw injuries.
No, my unit was actually a field dental unit, which has been since decommissioned. They don't really use field dental units anymore. So when our unit got to Iraq, we all got split up to multiple locations.
So when you saw people come back with injuries and stuff, how did you feel witnessing this?
It's tough.
The people you treat.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to see people like that. I mean, the first thing you sort of you're desensitized in a sense as a medical professional to those type of injuries. So I wouldn't have the same effect on me as it would if someone that doesn't see that all the time. So your first instinct is to help these people. But of course, it's tough to see people come back like that on a very routine basis. It's difficult.
Did you know of anyone that was captured as a prisoner of war?
No, not personally.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
I was awarded the Meritorious Service Medal and the Army Combination Medal.
And how did you gain those?
The Army Combination Medal for the different places that I was located, and the Meritorious Service Medal for the work that I did to build the dental clinic. It's a different type of awards based on our dental unit as opposed to some other people's awards that would be based on actual warfare type stuff.
Did you make any friendships, and with whom?
Yes, I was close with most of the people in my unit. There were probably 4 or 5 that I was very close with, and we would sort of travel all the time. And so it was difficult when we actually got to Iraq and we all got split up into different places because one guy actually couldn't come. The other girl was there for a very short amount of time, and then 2 of the other guys were in the prison camp that I was only at for a couple months before I went to the Iranian border. So it's tough, you don't see them for the next year and a half. So.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends back home?
Luckily, by the time I was there, we had fairly regular phone contact. So you could buy phone cards, and you had a certain amount of time that you could be on the phone. So we would call. We did have access to internet, so we could email pictures and stuff. So that was good. Mail.
What did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
It depends. If I was trying to build something, I'd play chess. There's a gym, so you work out a lot, which is good. It keeps your mind off things, decreases your stress level. At the Victory Base Complex, occasionally we'd actually go fishing. It'd be 110 degrees out there, but it's sort of when in Rome. Play volleyball, basically anything to pass the time.
Where were you when the war ended?
Yeah, I was probably in Texas at that point. Yeah.
So how did you return home?
When I left Iraq, we went straight to Ramstein Air Force Base. And then you sort of have this period of time where you're under observation just to make sure no one has any emotional or psychological issues that need to be dealt with. And then I stayed in Germany for about another year. And then my wife and I got out of the military and we actually moved to Texas for about a year.
How were you received by your family and community when you returned?
The one thing I can say about this war is that people have been received a lot. You know, people always say thank you for your service. In a way, it makes me feel really good. In a way, it makes me feel very guilty because of all the older vets that didn't really have that. And so sometimes I see the older vets and, you know, they say thank you for my service, and I'm like, you know, thank you. You know, you didn't have, people didn't give you a warm welcome when you came back. So for us, it was a much different experience.
How did you readjust to your life when you came back?
Personally, I think I adjusted well. You know, I don't think I have many, you know, you always think about the times that you were down there, but I don't think it had affected me in some of the ways that you see a lot of soldiers that are affected, that see more combat.
Have you remained in contact with your fellow veterans, the friends that you made?
I have, yeah.
Why? I mean, who?
Well, probably the guys that I was close with before that, we always remained in contact. One of them actually just got married this past year. And it's, you know, the why is just, you know, you build a strong bond to the people that you're with, and especially when you go through certain circumstances all together, so it makes that bond stronger.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations? If so, which ones?
I am not currently affiliated with that. I mean, well, technically, I guess the VA, but yeah.
What have you done since separating from the military?
Since I separated from the military, I went to Texas and I was a dentist down there for a while, and then I returned back home, and now I have my own dental practice in Northfield.
How did your wartime experiences affect your life?
I think that, you know, sometimes, I always think back because when I was in Cranston, I remember my first job that I got, my first interview, not my first job, my first real job, was for a pharmaceutical company, and at the time I lived maybe 15 minutes away from where the interview was. And I remember them saying, well, we don't have a job in Rhode Island, but we have a job in Connecticut. It might have been maybe 45 minutes. And, you know, small town is sort of like, well, I can't go to Connecticut. Like, that's way too far. And so now, after all the things that I've been through and gone through, it gives you, you know, much greater appreciation. You know, even at work, you know, it's sort of like something happens, you're like, it's not a big deal. Where, you know, you see like a lot of people freak out about it, or they can't deal with certain things, and they're like, don't worry about it. We'll get it fixed, or we'll make do. You know, one time we were, I was actually taking a tooth out on someone, and the power went out. And I was like, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And everyone's freaking out, like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I was like, it's okay. Relax. We'll get it out. We'll take care of you. So you just get used to dealing with things that people, you know, sort of take for granted, and, you know, a lot of the hardships that you have to deal with sort of make you stronger, I think.
What are some of the life lessons that you learned from your military service?
As I was telling them earlier, one of the lessons that it just always seems to come up, and we always joked about in the military was now I'm drawing a blank on in front of the camera, of course. Proper planning prevents piss poor performance. And it's sort of one of all these old adages that it just always comes up. And I was telling them, and I was just recently on a hiking trip, and I said this to someone because our 12-mile hike turned into 22 miles, and we ended up coming down the mountain in the dark. And it's just one of these things that I'm always planning for every given scenario that I could come up with. And not everyone does that. So I have a friend that planned the trip and was not up to my standards. But I think that's one of the things that I always come back to the military about, is that, you know, they just drive that in there, like, you know, if you don't have a solid plan for something, don't do it. Because, you know, even if you do have a solid plan, things will come up, but hopefully they're much more manageable.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
You know, part of it, when you see a lot of injured soldiers, it makes it hard to sort of, you know, be supportive of the certain wars. I mean, you always want to be supportive of people that can't protect themselves. So I saw a lot of that in Iraq. You see a lot of poor people that don't have anything, and you feel horrible for these people. So it's a strong dichotomy of compassion versus compassion for other people versus compassion for your own people. And so it's always a tough thing for me, because people have very strong opinions about the war in general. Just, should we go to war, should we not go to war? And I always find it difficult, because in one sense, I want to protect our own soldiers. In another sense, it's hard to see people that have like nothing and they're just trying to survive with their own kids. So it's tough to see that.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view this interview?
What message? I think that whatever type of community or military service that you do will always make you stronger. And learn everything that you can. A lot of the stuff that I've learned also is just traveling outside of the military. Do as much as you can, learn as much as you can, and live life to the fullest. Because you don't know when it's going to be. That's for sure.
Do you feel like there's anything else that you haven't mentioned that needs to be discussed?
No, not really. There's just, so much. You could talk for hours about, every bit of service. So, I brought a bunch of pictures that I have of all parts of the war. So they're pretty interesting, things that you don't usually see, the media doesn't cover. There's a lot of stuff that, you just don't see and that I find interesting. So I can show you guys when we're done if you like.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So this first picture, and this is in the Victory Base complex, basically Saddam's palace complex. And this is an area where they called Flintstone Village. It was an area within the Victory Base complex where all his sort of illegitimate children used to be. And they created, literally, it's like a little Flintstone village. So this was always interesting to me. The other thing that you'll see in these pictures is that there's a lot of lakes in here. And what was interesting is that all Saddam's palaces are surrounded by lakes. The people outside of the palace complex didn't have any water. So when the walls came down and after Saddam was put out of power, everyone was sort of amazed at how much water there actually was in the area. The soldiers can take tours through the complexes. A bunch of random photos here, but there's some interesting ones. A lot of the complexes were very opulent from the facade, the way it looked. But after all the bombs went through, you can kind of see how it was built, and they were built actually very cheaply. This is a photo where a bunker bomb came through. Here's another lake, and that's another picture of the Flintstone Village. You weren't allowed to fly an American flag down there because that would have been a sort of that we were an occupying force that we were not supposed to be. But we still flew our flags wherever possible, just out of the view of anyone. These are just, from the explosion, some shards of glass that were lodged in the wall. This was an old movie theater that got hit by a bomb. Most of the palace complexes, you can see the roof caved in. Most of the palace complexes were all destroyed, but some stuff still remained. This is a powerful picture for me because it was a swimming pool that they used to use for executions. So this is blood splatter. I don't know if you guys want to cut that out, but they had a lot of these little things. These are actually bat houses. They were kind of littered all over the Victory Base complex. So again, Flintstone Village. These are T-walls. Most of the complexes were all sort of surrounded by concrete T-walls. So the military spent a lot of money in concrete. They were everywhere. This is a view from a helicopter. So everywhere you go, especially in the helicopters, they always had someone on the machine gun just in case. This is sort of what I lived in. What we lived in is a shipping connex, an aluminum shipping connex, and it was sort of subdivided into 3 sections. So you'd have your own little aluminum space. It did have an air conditioner, thank God. And then people shared stuff, so you always have a bunch of like random furniture that one person left, you know, someone else picked up. And then FedEx. You know, it's nice when people actually ship you things and a little sense of home. Palaces. There's some of the other dentists. Dining facilities. You know, we were always in our BDUs, or sorry, our ACUs. And we always had our weapons with us. Exception the dental facilities, we're able to take it off and put a regular scrub top on, check our weapons. Again, all over you see a lot of kids, you know, basically you can tell they don't have much. You'll see a lot of old tanks, you know, once something gets destroyed, it basically stays there. You know, here's one, you know, someone spray painted, "I love you, Mom." There's always construction going on. Where the oils well were, you know, once an oil fire starts, like, you know, during the war, it just kept going. So what else is in there? This is just, I can't tell what that is. Some areas were still heavily littered with landmines, whether it was for, you know, soldiers walking, or some of the roads were actually littered with landmines. You'll see some pictures of that. This is old oil wells. These are the bunkers that they used to house some of the planes in prior to the war. And I think they were built by the French, and they were supposed to be able to withstand the American bunker bombs. And so there was actually a big lawsuit from Kuwait and France, because Kuwait commissioned France to build these, and they didn't stand up. So you'll see a lot of these that were actually destroyed. Again, these are all landmines. Some of this stuff. You just see a lot of old rocket launchers, helicopters. I was probably, I don't think maybe the Kuwaiti, Iraqi Airways. The sandstorms were very interesting. You know, everything gets blanketed and turns yellow. Can't see much. So if you're driving and there's a sandstorm and you run across the area of landmines, it can be very dangerous. This is a bridge that got hit. You know, sometimes you find these weapon caches of different different bombs. There's some other interesting pictures in here. You know, bridge destroyed, tanks. This is an old satellite area destroyed. And this is an old tank, and the top of it they spray painted "Living Good," and then probably got hit with a mine. Tank. See lots of camels. Camels everywhere. So yeah, it's pretty funny. Luckily nowadays we actually can phone home, which was nice. So there's all warning signs depending on where you are. You actually get the area you go to first is actually in Kuwait. That's sort of the staging area. Then you actually go into Iraq. So taking up some flags down. Yeah. Again, this is some of the local kids. The problem is that you run across people everywhere, and you don't know in what capacity these people are for. Did they just plant a mine? Did they just plant a, you know, are they gathering intelligence for someone up the road? You just don't know. So you always kind of check everyone out. Some flame dropping some missiles. You know, part of when we take over the complexes, you just find a lot of different things. So there's some photos in here of some gold-plated weapons. You know, and that car get hit by an IED, and just tell the impact. You know, again, a lot of the times you're just fighting people that were pretty much brainwashed and they don't have much as it is. So this tank is actually taking down a Saddam mural. And that's pretty much what the soldiers are going there to protect, is the people that can't fight for themselves, the women and children. There's always something in your way. So if you're in a tank and it's in the way, you just go over it. So the BBC complex. You know, again, just because you're in a tank doesn't mean you're safe. You know? These are just all spent ammunition casings, so that, you know, obviously massive firefight happened there. Sometimes people loved us, sometimes they hated us. You just didn't really know what you were going to find. Barbed wire. This was an old Saddam stagecoach. You know, this picture is pretty powerful. It's a picture of Saddam, and then, you know, the Twin Towers being blown up. Again, just more landmines. There's a road just littered with landmines. Someone has to clear that, so. You know, a lot of times, you know, you see this picture of some boots and then, you know, an M16 and a helmet, and that's, you know, to remember your fallen comrades or someone that died in their unit, probably. Again, lots of weapons that we recovered, all sorts of weapons. You know, this is a gold-plated AK-47 with a silencer. Like, this obviously came from Saddam's palace, but, you know, these are some of the things that you'd find after they vacated the palace complexes. You know, stacks and stacks of, you know, submachine guns and briefcases. This was a SUV turned into a rocket launcher. So these type of things didn't have any accuracy, but that's, you know, that's what they had to use. So. This was shipping containers, just full from front to back, top to bottom, of just old weapons. It's the bathroom at the palace. I think that was a mural before they backed over it with the tank. There's missiles. I don't know how long this goes on, if you guys can stop me whenever you want, but again, gold-plated weapons, platinum-plated. These are some of the unique finds. You know, these are just stockpiles of, they would use these for IEDs, and they would basically daisy chain them along the road, try to hide them. And then they would just, as soon as one went off, boom, 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 boom. So that's how they would try to catch like a convoy. They'd wait till the convoy get into sort of what they call the kill zone, and then blow it up. Now all these pictures are from the Iraq War. That was in the Saddam Palace. It's pretty funny. Camels get thirsty too. Yeah, so one of the questions is, what do we have? We always had water. There were pallets of water everywhere. It might have been 100 degrees, but we always had water.
Thank you for showing us the
Yeah, you're
pictures, and
welcome.
thank you for coming for the interview. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.